Okay, we're live. Surprise. Hey, folks, it's me. I'm Zoë Verdin. I'm the Director of Operations at Effective Artistry. And there's
Hello,
Brandon. Hello.
I'm Brandon Tessers. I'm the founder and clinical director at Effective Artistry. Thank you, Zoe. I
Yes,
have been running 5 minutes behind on everything today, including this, and I needed some water because I'm very dehydrated.
of course.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here, whoever is here. I'm glad to have Zoe with me today. Thank you, Zoe, for joining me.
My pleasure.
Uh, this is not therapy hour. We call it that because I try to be very clear that I am a licensed therapist. This is not therapy for very, very, very many reasons. This is just an open conversation. We're here so that we're accessible and visible and available. You're here, I don't know, maybe because I have a soothing voice, I've been told, or maybe because you're interested in things. And it's a conversation, and like any other, the things that I do and say impact you. If you're paying attention, then it prompts things, and the things that you do and say, it impacts us. And yeah, that can mean you ask a question and we answer it, but that's not how all conversations go. So if you're here watching, great, thank you. And if you're watching it after the fact, great, thank you. And I'm just guessing about who you are and what you might want to hear and what might be useful. Uh, if you're here and you're in the chat, which thank you, I'm seeing a vast insider in the chat already right now. If you're in the chat, then I don't have to guess as much about what you might want to hear or how you might be interpreting things. I can just see what you're actually saying and asking. So that's even better for me. Of course, this is public, so if you're putting things in the chat, just be aware of that, and that this video will be saved and accessible after the fact and still public. If you're on Facebook watching this and you made a comment, it would be attached to your Facebook account. That would be the name that appears. If you're on YouTube, it would be your Google account. And if you're on Twitch, it would be your Twitch account. If you want to ask something, you can always create a fake account, just ask something for that reason. Effective Artistry is a therapy and executive functioning coaching practice, excuse me. We do individual, family, group therapy. We just started last night our first neurodiversity affirming parenting group. So we do some groups. We've got more of those coming up, some art groups. We have a group coming up based around tabletop role playing game, although I guess that one's not going to be accessible to people online for the first iteration at least. Yeah, I'm trying to put out all my stuff. Does that sound like most of it, Zoe? I know.
It sounds like most of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, just the last piece. Every week we pick a topic because we don't want to just sit here talking, being silent until somebody has to say something in the chat. That's too much pressure. It's too awkward. I don't like silence like that. So we pick a topic and we talk about that. But those of you who are here in the chat, you take precedence, which means that if we go off of that topic in some other direction, that's okay. You don't have to only ask questions or say things about the topic that we've chosen. What is the topic that we've chosen today, Zoe?
Well, um, today I do want to talk a little bit about parenting because you had this workshop last night, and I wanted to discuss with you how it went, what kind of things came up, and then some of my own thoughts and concerns. So I want to see if you can kind of take it from there and give me a little idea of what kind of
It was
things.
good. It was a good first session for a group. Just so that you guys watching know, the structure of this parenting group is it's a closed group. It's a 6-week set duration, hour and a half, one session per week of an hour and a half. And the aim is to spend the first half hour or so with me presenting, sharing concepts and language and frameworks, and then the remaining hour or so working with group members to talk about the actual things that are happening in their lives that brought them there, and applying the work that we're doing, the new language and the new frameworks to those things to come up with actual, real, actionable things to do. And the first session, so anybody who watches this stream more than once will know I can be verbose and didactic and professorial sometimes. Originally, when I was designing it, I had week 1 be all about just neurodiversity, and week 2 was all about executive functioning. But those are topics that are more about like we gotta just teach a bit here, And so I combined them into the first. I wanted to knock that part of it out in the first session. It's like, here, let's do the like lecture-y stuff all at the top. So we went more than half an hour on that stuff, but I think it was useful. We talked neurodiversity, executive functioning, and we did get into people's, asking questions and applying those concepts. What else do you want to know? Give me some questions.
Was there anything that you brought up that you were kind of teaching about that was clearly a light bulb for some of our parents, or clearly something that was like a little mind blowing that maybe you didn't expect to be, or that you knew what would
My
be?
whole deal, Zoe. There was lots of moments like
I know, but I want to hear.
No, those are good questions. I would say, all right, I'll frame it this way for you, Zoe, and for the people here, even though I didn't use this language last night. So we did talk last night about cognitive miser. Cognitive miser is a theory, the cognitive miser theory, the idea that the brain doesn't spend resources unless it has a reason to do so, that the default reaction to any stimuli is to do nothing. Only if that stimuli evokes some response do we then expend any resources of any kind, including attention, even noticing the thing, or awareness, thinking about the thing. And then we do the bare minimum we need to do in order to navigate the thing. And only if our attempts fail do we then say, oh, okay, I need to put more into it, right? Because of that, there's a particular thing I call sticky answers. I'm sure there is a better, more like high-minded term for it, but I don't know what that other term would be. So I call it sticky answers, which means you face a problem, you come up with an idea of how to resolve that problem. So ideation, and then execution is putting that idea into action, right? And if you have come up with a good idea that you haven't executed yet, but it makes sense, it's theoretically logical that it would be able to solve the problem, but you haven't been able to execute it, then you stop coming up with new answers. That's why we call it the sticky answer. It's stuck there, because until you can test it, the brain is, well, I'm going to try and come up with a solution. Well, what other solution could I come up with besides the one I already came up with? That's the best solution I could come up with. Why would I think more about it, right? So a practical example that's very common here is, I'm tired. I don't like being tired. I want that to be different. Why am I tired? Let me start coming up with theories. Probably because I didn't sleep enough last night. So how could I fix it? Well, tonight I'll go to bed early, and that way I'll get more sleep, and tomorrow I won't be tired, which is great. Theoretically, it could happen. It could work. And then the night rolls around, and for whatever reason, I don't go to bed early. And then the next morning, I'm tired again. And I say, and at this point, instead of going back to the first and saying, what is it that might be impacting me? What could I do? Instead of that, I already have an answer. Damn it, I didn't go to bed early tonight or last night. I've really got to go to bed early tonight. And then the night rolls around and I don't. And the next day, I really have to go to bed early. And now I'm just worried about, like, what are the things I can do to make myself go to bed early? I've fixated on this one particular strategy, and I've lost track of what the actual problem itself is. So in order to enable people to learn something new, you have to demonstrate a need for that learning. In the academic environment, that means we're using grades and tests like that. We make artificial reasons for it to be important for you to learn. You need to learn it so you can pass the test, right? In real life, it's because we're facing some problem that we don't know how to navigate. That's why it's important to learn. So when we're starting something like this, what we have to do is make it clear why it's worth it, not just to the person consciously, because obviously they think it's worth it or they wouldn't be there in the first place, but to their brain, to actually admit that stuff into awareness, to pay very close, detailed attention. And one of the things that we do to make that work is we take away sticky answers. We point out the flaws and the limitations of why, even if you could enact them, they might not work. Or sometimes, theoretically it might work, but you can't enact it. And we need to take away the idea that you could theoretically enact it. In other words, there are reasons you're not going to bed early. And you can get mad at yourself all you want, but it's still not happening. And we need to come up with something else to test, because there's lots of things you could do that make you less tired. So this first stuff, talking about neurodiversity and executive functioning is, number one, neurodiversity is about taking away the sticky answer, because in our culture, people generally are raised within the context of what we call the medical model or the deficit model, to such an extent that people don't even know that it's just one option of how to look at these things.
Mm-hmm.
That a disorder is an illness, a pathological variation. It's an injury that must be healed or treated or fixed, right? The medical model being, we can draw a circle, a boundary around normal functioning, and everything else outside of that is abnormal. And normal, we could sub out with the word healthy or proper or appropriate or whatever, right? That we're saying that if you are abnormal, then that's bad. It is a deficit. And we want to try and get you back into those boundaries so that you can be normal again. Neurodiversity is a specific rejection of that. So that's why we focus on that first, to clarify that and make it clear that different people are different. That doesn't mean that everybody's wonderful and nobody ever has problems. There's still disabilities, there are still struggles, but that we don't paint those struggles as purely a deficit. In other words, any way of being is situationally advantageous or disadvantageous. It depends on what you're trying to do and the context in which you're trying to do it. And generally, we don't pay attention to the context. We don't pay attention to what's being asked of people. If you're working with a kid, or if your children have like school avoidance issues, right, that they don't want to go to school, people will say, well, they have to go to school. And you say, why? Because they're 8, and that's what 8-year-olds do. That's not a reason. Why? Because they have to. If you can't answer it, then that is something that the culture has messaged to you and you've internalized. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that you don't know why it's right, and therefore you can't explain or express to anybody else why it's right. That's when people start to get defensive and stuff. So we focus on neurodiversity to get rid of all that, the idea that the source of and the solution to an individual's problems are all contained within the individual, because that's unhelpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then executive functioning, we get into to offer a new way of looking at it, saying, okay, if it's not just about health, like this is healthy and this is unhealthy, or this is good and this is ill, or whatever, then what is it about? And then we talk about executive functioning, which is, to sum up, just the fact that no matter what you think, you can't make yourself do that, not consciously. There's a gap between a conscious intention, I'm going to take a sip of water, and the execution, my body contracting the particular muscles that need to be contracted exactly the amount that they need to be contracted, and picking up the data about how heavy this is so that I'm holding it at the right height and not just shooting it up or whatever it is, right? We can't do all that consciously. So as opposed to treating it as though everything everybody does is something they want to do and everything they don't do is something they don't want to do, we just acknowledge the truth that you want to do a thing, you intend to do a thing, and then we see what happens. And sometimes, the vast majority of the time, it goes the way you want it to. Sometimes it doesn't. And then we can make guesses about what's happening, the patterns of things that might be occurring in that gap between intending and acting. And then we can do stuff with those patterns. But as you just saw, first we got to go into depth about why the way people already think about it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Then we have to offer a new thing. Then starting week 2, we start to get into what to do with this new way. We have that week in between, partly because I couldn't jam pack even more in. There was a lot for people to learn last night.
Yeah, I believe that.
But also to have a week to apply that language, to go through your life and start to see in yourself, especially for parents, because this isn't about the kids, it's about you, but everybody's concerned about the kids, obviously. Nothing wrong with that. They wouldn't be there. But you have to learn how to internalize this stuff. So here's the thing that blew people's minds in answer to your first question.
Yeah.
I said, hungry, you feel hunger. Sometimes you experience the feeling of being hungry. What is that? Define it. What does it mean to be hungry? And everybody reacted kind of the way that you're reacting right now. There's a lot of language that just assume other people mean the same thing that we do. And so we never bother trying to figure out a different way to explain whatever it is we're trying to. Everybody knows what hungry is, right? except obviously it means different things to different people. So that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. I do want to, we've got a couple comments here. The gap between intending and acting is the story of my entire life.
Yeah, Bastion Cider is one of our regulars. I really appreciate their presence.
Yeah,
They're very
absolutely.
active in the chat and a lot of jokes and things in there
Uh,
too. I love it.
I wanted to, oh, what did I lose it? So a parent coming to you and having an issue with their kid not wanting to be, as you said, being school averse. Let's get like really practical for a second. We're taking away those sticky answers. What happens next? And for this particular example, what happens next when you're working with a parent?
We need more information.
Okay.
That's a big part of it is people want to skip to practical answers. That's the kind of
Yeah,
stuff that gets published in
absolutely.
books and self-help videos and those kinds of things, as though things are
Yes.
simple. It's part
That's
of
what you do.
it's born of this obsession that we have with categorizing things. That, all right, am I experiencing this because of my ADHD or because of my autism or just because I'm a little tired right now or because I'm depressed? That's not an answerable question. That's not how any of this stuff
Yes.
works, because this stuff isn't purely biological in nature, as opposed to a medical, like a purely physical biological issue like diabetes or cancer or something like that, right? That you could say, wow, I'm feeling really nauseous. I wonder if that's from this or from that. If they both share the symptom of nausea, there's no way to tell. But if only one of them causes nausea, then you know it's that one, not the other. All the stuff we're talking about, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, experience, is way too complicated for that stuff. So people try to categorize it all because then you can give advice on the category. So what a lot of people in that position will do is saying, my kid is having, I hate this phrasing, honestly, but it is like the common correct phrasing is to say that they are experiencing school avoidance or they are school avoidant. I don't like that, but we're going to use that language because that's the language that exists. Is that they'll go, look, okay, when your child is school avoidant, what do you do? And if you use the language school avoidant, you'll get a certain set of answers. And if you just say, my kid won't listen to me, you'll get a different set of answers. Or my kid seems to be really anxious about school, you'll get a different set of answers. Or my kid seems really bored in school. Or
Really based on how you've already categorized it.
Right.
Is the advice you're going to get based on how the lens you're already coming in looking at.
Yep. And the people who want you to look at it as school avoidance will make arguments about, hey, this isn't about anxiety. This isn't about being worried about a bully. This isn't about it. This is about school avoidance. And the people who are saying, no, this is about anxiety are going to say school avoidance is not relevant here. That just describes not wanting to go to school. It doesn't mean anything about why they don't want to go because they're anxious. When somebody else will say, and so we get responses. People will say, well, what do I do if my kid is school avoidant? Be practical. And I have practical answers, but I have no idea which of those might apply to your child. So number one, we're always going to start with the framework that this is an iterative process, that we don't know. I almost swore, but I didn't. That we don't know. Not me, not you, not the parent, not even the kid themselves. We as individuals don't know what things will work for us. If there's something about our experience that we don't like and want to change, if we know how to do it, we do it. And so we don't really think that much about it. If there's something we want to change that we're thinking about, it's because we don't know how to do it. And you got to come up with ideas and try them to get more information and then iterate. And that requires a few things.
Yeah. And so, okay. So I'm a parent I've been informed. I've been given this language of my child is school avoidant.
Are you role playing?
I am. I'm very curious about this process because to me, you and I have talked theory about a bunch of different things, and I want to see what it's like going through this iterative process with you,
So
little by
first thing I
little.
need is information, and
Yeah.
I'll get into
So
the role
then
play with you,
great, let's
but
do this.
I'm gonna just let you know role playing may not work super well here. It doesn't tend to work well with this kind of stuff because
I
I'm
thought it
gonna
might
ask
not.
a lot of questions. And if it's not something you're actually experiencing, actually thinking about, it's really hard to come up with answers at all, but especially ones that might be realistic for someone in that position. But
Yeah.
we'll
I
try.
might be able to make things up, but they might not be realistic.
We'll
You're
see.
right.
Okay.
You're right. Okay.
So first thing, what do you mean? You say they're avoiding school. I know what school avoidance means generally, but everybody's different. So for you particularly, what are we talking about?
I mean, my son wakes up in the morning, I wake him up, and I can tell right from the very beginning of when he starts arguing with me about getting his clothes on, that he doesn't wanna go, that he's angry. He wakes up upset, and he's not ready to go to school that morning, and the reason I know this is because it doesn't happen on the weekends. He wakes up in the morning on the weekends, and it's not the same. He's not frustrated by getting dressed. He's not frustrated about eating breakfast.
That
That's the
makes sense.
first thing.
Have you're being very clear and specific in telling me, you know, almost like I'm accusing you of being inaccurate, that he's not avoiding school. I believe you. You don't have to justify it to me. But have you asked him?
If he wants to go to school?
Yeah. Rather than having to look at the patterns of weekdays versus
Mm,
weekends,
yeah.
what does he say about it?
When I have asked him in the past, he has said, "No, I don't wanna go to school."
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Mhm.
don't need all that other evidence. He's telling you he doesn't want to go to
Mm.
school. Is this every day?
It is. Yeah, it's every
And
day.
does he end up going?
Yes, because I make him.
What does that mean, make him?
Um,
What is that? If I were watching a video of you making him go to school, what would I be seeing?
um, you'd see me talking to him about what he can expect, that we have to get into the car because we need to go to school, and he gets in the car and he's grumpy until I drop him off. I drop him off at school and he goes in.
And this strikes you as abnormal? I mean, obviously, it's unenjoyable. It's problematic. It doesn't need to be abnormal for it to be worth us talking about it. But the way you're presenting it to me makes it seem to me as though what you're saying is this is not a normal way for kids to navigate their morning about going to school.
I want him to like going to school.
Hmm. Did you like going to school when you were a kid?
I did.
Nice.
And I have a lot of people who I have a lot of friends whose kids can't wait to go to school in the morning, and it makes me sad.
So why do you think your kid is responding differently? And I don't mean why is he responding differently, because you don't know. I don't know. He probably doesn't even know. I mean, if you're coming to me with this, you have been thinking about this. You have thoughts, you have theories. I want to know what those theories are. What do you think
Mhm.
is the difference between him and these other kids? Why it's harder for him?
This is where my role play may break down.
Yeah, this is why it often does break down.
I see that. No, this is really interesting for me to, just watch the way yeah, you're really questioning every little aspect of what's happening
Mhm.
in that person's life, and not making assumptions that just because what the parent is reporting is a theory or not making assumptions that what the parent's report is at what's necessarily accurate for what's happening with the child and what the child themselves is experiencing. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I'll say what the parent is reporting is definitely not accurate. It cannot be, but
Mm,
I'll expand that to say that the child's report wouldn't be accurate either, because that's not how this works.
Okay, what does that
If
mean?
you explain in full, accurate detail why you do everything you do, why you like what you like and don't like what you don't like.
Oh, I see.
These are theories, and it's great. It's information. Other than a child themselves, the person, in most cases, in many cases, the person who has more information about that child than anybody else except for them is the parent. In many cases, especially in our country, the mother. I want that information. Part of the reason that this works the way that I do it is because it's not rhetorical. I'm not trying to make a point. I'm not asking a question to prove to you that you don't have the answer. I don't know if you have an answer or not. I genuinely want that information, which is really unsettling for a lot of people to work with me in this way, because so many of us, we rely on reading the other person. Like, what does he want from me? What is he trying to say?
Absolutely.
And I don't want anything except an answer to the question, an honest one. And I'm not trying to say anything other than that I think that information might be interesting or useful or relevant.
Can I completely shift focus to an experience you and I had last night with an interview?
Yes, but let's be careful about
Yes,
identifying information and
absolutely,
specifics.
absolutely. So I it was a very interesting experience because it was clear that the person we were interviewing had very specific ideas, like many people do, about what an interview is meant to look like. Um, and I'm curious to know what your experience of that. Maybe you can help whoever's watching by giving like a little snapshot into what that conversation was like with the especially with like the doodling and the kind of preconceived ideas of what interviews need to be.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of this is about attention. That my role as a therapist, more than anything, is about capturing the client's attention and then directing that attention. Meaning, I don't have answers, but if I ask questions, they're going to pay attention to what the answers to those questions might be. That could be coming up with an answer or putting words to something that you've never put words to, or it could be realizing that you don't know the answer to the question, right? But a lot of the time, what we're doing in most social interactions, we're not totally safe, we're not vulnerable, we're not authentic, because we shouldn't be. Authenticity is great in the right context. You don't want to walk around being perfectly vulnerable and authentic with everybody. You're not safe with everybody, right? In therapy, we're doing a lot to try and make sure that not only is the client actually safe, but that they perceive the fact that they are safe. Anyway, I'm trying to get their attention and point it somewhere, because I think that where I'm trying to point it is something I'm interested in, not because I'm making a deduction, a diagnosis, and, oh, they need to do this thing, analysis, they have miscategorized, blah, 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 or anything like that. It's because I'm following my curiosity. I genuinely want to know. And then that leads them down that path. So one way of answering your question about what happened is getting people's attention is really easy if you're a problem for them. It's really difficult if you're not a problem for them. It's doable, but it's difficult.
And can you define like what problem would you as an employer or as an interviewer?
Well, in this particular case, right, if someone's going in a job interview, they want the job. And so the problem is they need you to think of them in such a way that you will give them the job that they want you to give them. That's the default premise. And of course, that is, even here, that's still the structure. What would we do an interview for if not to say, like, some people we think might be a fit here and some people we don't think would be a fit here, right? The difference in how we run it, though, is that we're doing it on the other side too, that you, the interviewee, should be interviewing the position as well to see whether it's something that is a fit for you. And because of many, many reasons, that's not something that people always have the ability to do. Sometimes we just need to get whatever job we can get to pay the bills, which, oppression and money and blah, blah, blah. We won't get into all that stuff today. In other words, she's trying to read what we're looking for and give it to us, right? If what we're looking for is different than what people generally are looking for, it causes confusion and distress, because I've now got cognitive dissonance going on between my premise, my idea of what this was going to be, but I'm picking up some data from you that's suggesting that it's not that, but I don't know exactly what it is. So I try to be as clear as possible about what we are doing. But a lot of the things that I say are so unusual that people can't quite like believe it at first. You know, when I say things like, if such and such is a helpful thing for you to do, I would like for you to do it. Right.
At this moment.
Right.
During this interview.
Yeah. But it's very, if I mean what I say, then great, no problem. But if I don't, if it's a test, and if I'm aware that sometimes theoretically in job interviews, people try and test you or trap you or trick you. So if he means what he says, okay, I could doodle, that'd be fine, but I could also not doodle and that would also be fine. If it's a trick, if he's trying to see whether or not I'm capable of having a conversation without doodling to, you know, assist my focus, well then doodling would be a problem and not doodling would not. So it's safer just not to, right?
Yes, and I don't know if I agree with you about what, if you mean what you say, then there's no problem, because one of the things we came up against, which I think that which I've been thinking a lot about, and I think that I responded in a similar way, is if someone has their preconceptions of what of what an interview is supposed to be, and you, just like you're talking about now, and you propose something like being able to doodle while they work, regardless of whether you mean it, they may be very resistant based on not just even if you're as authentic as you possibly can, and they really do believe you. There are things that come along. There are aspects of you being an employer that play a role. There's the aspect of you being tall, imposing,
Yeah.
but potentially a intimidating person to individuals, and I don't know that it matter. I don't know that you can necessarily break down someone all of that stuff for someone in the moment.
Sure. I don't think it's realistic to think that you can override everything that everybody already knows about a situation, right? But the more that I'm getting somebody's attention, and I don't just mean the binary, are you paying attention or not? I mean the granularity, the depth of how much of my awareness is directed at this thing. I can pay attention to 5 different things at once, or only one of them. If I'm doing only one, I'm getting a lot more information about the one than I would if I was paying attention to 5, right? But it all still comes down. I agree, it's not realistic. It's not possible to override everything everybody already knows in such a short period of time. Doesn't make it any different than what I'm saying, though. Those are just reasons that it's difficult to believe that I'm saying what I mean and that I mean what I'm saying. It's totally reasonable to think that I might not mean what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with that. But you still don't think that I mean what I'm saying.
Right.
And of course, that we have to allow for the fact that communication is different. Words mean different things to different people. So it could be that even though I think I'm being clear about what I'm trying to say, that it's coming across in another way. And I try to accommodate for that and be clear and communicate about, getting a sense of what they're understanding and clarifying and all that. I don't remember what your initial question was, or what you want to talk about with this.
I don't know that I had an initial question, but I do. But Best Insider has a comment. He says, "I have a lot to." They say I have a lot to say about interviews, but a lot of it boils down to I have 30 minutes to both stand out and not trigger any red flags with offhand comments that can very easily be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
And sorry.
So yeah, that's stressful.
Very stressful. And I would imagine for individuals who consider themselves neurodivergent and consider themselves as potentially not being able to necessarily interpret what is and is not an offhand comment. Like, I can't imagine how much more stressful that would make an interview process.
Well,
Um,
job interviews are generally theater, right? Like
mm,
nobody's saying what they actually mean
yeah.
for the most part. Sometimes they already know who they want to hire before the interviews are happening, or they have a bias or lean a certain way. They're looking at things. The interviewer is looking at things over which you have no control. I, I used to be an actor, right? Like we talk about this in acting a lot. I've had experiences with casting directors being like, we think you're awesome and we would love to use you, but you're 6'5", and the lead you would be playing opposite is 5'2", and we can't match you on stage like that, right? That in acting we talk a lot about there are things beyond your control that people make decisions on, and it's just kind of accepted as par for the course because it's acting and what you look like matters. I don't know that that's how it should be, but that is how it's discussed.
Mm,
Whereas in other cases we try to hide that. Like even if I do have a preference, if I'm a normal job interviewer, even if I do have a preference for a male candidate or a female candidate or whatever kind of identity that I might be looking for, I'm not going to say that. So I'm hiding that. I might not be aware of it myself, but I might even be aware of it and not be saying it. So yeah, the interviewees are trying to make a guess about what the interviewer is looking for and then give that to them. The interviewer is trying to assess for things that they're not actually saying that they're assessing for.
mm-hmm.
They might be assessing for the things they're actually, saying out loud that they're assessing for as well. But a lot of it is things like, how easy are you going to be to manage for me? Are
Mm-hmm.
you going to be easy or difficult for me to manage? Are you going to get along well with the other people on the team or not? And they'll have their opinions about what elements or what traits of a person might mean that they'll get along well with the team or not. At the end of the day, for the most part, without getting too much into the politics of it, they're looking for someone off of whose labor they can profit. And that means they're looking for someone they can exploit. I want maximum ability, but for minimum effort on my end. I want it to be those are the things I'm balancing. That if you're a genius and you can do such great work that we can leverage and make a lot of money off of, but you're also incredibly difficult to work with, like, okay, maybe, but you really got to be up there. Whereas somebody who's very easy and you'll do anything I say and no problem, but also you're not doing it, then I don't know if that's worth it. So they're trying to balance, like, how much is it worth putting effort in to get how much out of you. But you don't say that. You have your theories about what makes somebody easy to manage, what makes them brilliant or able to put out good work, and you try and assess for those things instead. It's theater. It is nerve-wracking, and it sucks. That's not how it should be. It causes problems for the employer and the employee.
Yeah.
There's a reason that we do it different. It's not just because I think, oh, I'm such a good guy, I do this such a nice way. No, it's because I want people who actually want to do the things that we're talking about doing. I'm not a manager. Not carrots, not sticks, none of that. I communicate. I'm a supervisor and a trainer, and I don't want to manage anybody. So why would I want to give an impression that I think is appealing or appetizing to them, but isn't actually how it is here? That just means later on, either they're going to leave or they're going to be miserable, or I'm going to have to change a bunch of what I just want to be clear and authentic. This is who I am. This is how it works. It's not for everybody, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I think I told you, I don't even remember if I told you, at the end of that interview, what I told the candidate was, okay, take at least 24 hours and then tell me whether I'm hiring you, because it's up to you. And of course, I wouldn't have said that to anybody, right? We are still doing some assessment of, is this person a fit from my perspective? But it's the same way I do in consults with potential clients. I need to do some assessment to make sure that what you're looking for is within my scope. I don't want you to be thinking you want this and that's not what we do or whatever. But as long as that's the case, then it's about me being transparent with you. I don't want an employee who doesn't like what we're doing. That doesn't mean that I don't want employees to, never dislike anything. People are going to dislike, and I want people to feel comfortable telling me about that, which is also very unusual. So yeah, the interview is unusual, but so is everything else about working here.
It's true. I need to read some of these comments. Best instead is One of my new favorite people. They said, "I wish I could get a magical review at the end of each interview when I get the decision letter that says, 'This is exactly how the decision was made.'" He said, "Or maybe just a recording of the discussion. Maybe I should start hiding a microphone in the room when I leave."
That would
Excuse
be
me,
interesting.
I'm hired by you now. Boston Cider is your new coach.
I like that. I mean,
Excellent.
basically, you've been here so much, you know
Yeah,
more
I mean,
about what we do.
exactly. You can probably answer all of my questions.
Honestly, this will give you a sense of how neurodivergent I am, I suppose, as though it's an intensity thing. But when people are like, "What superpower? If you could have any superpower, what would you want it to be?" My actual answer, and yes, I have actually spent time thinking about this and like phrasing it, is I would like the ability to think about something that has happened and immediately get an itemized list of every variable that factored in and the percentage of the impact that that variable had on the outcome as compared to all the rest. And it would be an infinite thing because, very quickly you'd get down to 0.0000, 1%
Impact
or whatever.
with all
But
the
it would go
impact.
on
Yeah, yeah.
forever. I just would want to be able to look as far down the list as I could. That would be the best. So I'm talking about, yeah, I wish I could have
For what purpose?
any best insider is saying, I want to know why it happened. If I
Yeah.
like it, I want to know why it happened so I can have more. If I don't like it, I want to know why it happened so I can have less. And honestly, not just for me, this is why I like doing this work. I wish I could, I wish somebody could say, like, my kid is school avoidant, what's going on? And yeah, superpower. Like, okay, well, that's 16% because he's being bullied. It's 8%
Oh
because
my
he's not
god, that's
getting the
so
right
funny.
nutrition in the morning and he's tired. It's 6% because his sleep schedule would actually be optimal for 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. rather than, that would be awesome.
That is so great.
That's what people
I
want.
do
I
love
would love
that.
to be able to. I hate, people ask me questions all the time, like presentations, and I'll start. My first thing is like, okay, this is going to be a frustrating answer for you, and then I give my answer. I don't want to do. I don't relish being like, I'm not going to give you the answer that you want. It's not like a power trip. It's just I try to be honest about what I can do, what I can say, what I know. I wish I could do that stuff. That'd be awesome, but I can't. So I'll do what I can.
Yeah. You had said something about, parents. I know you had talked to me a while back before you were doing, a workshop on anxiety for, parents and those with neurofibromatosis, about parents need about, the problems parents face being based I'm poorly phrasing this, but being based in their desire for predictability, to be able to predict the future.
Yeah, I
How
know
would
what
you
you're
can you
referencing. How would I phrase that?
how would you phrase that? Yeah, because this is
That
yeah,
that the role of parenting is one that asks you, if not requires you, to predict the future, which is an inherently
yeah,
impossible task. That from before you even start trying to have a child, if that's the way by which you ended up with a child, because not everybody tries to, but from the moment you start thinking about whenever it happens, from the moment you start thinking about a child, having a child, being a parent, you're predicting what would be good for them. If I do this thing now, how will that impact them later on in life? What can I do to set them up for success? Whether I define success as they're happy and independent or they're, really good at sports or whatever thing I might care about. The nature of parenting inherently is I have impact, influence, responsibility, control, whatever words you want to use with this being, this child. At the first stage, for humans, I like Harvey Karp, The Happiest Baby on the Block. I don't like the whole book, but I like the reference to the fourth trimester, that due to the evolutionary nature of human beings, human babies are born way before they are capable of surviving outside of the womb, in large part because our heads are too big, because our brains are too big, because that's how we've evolved.
hmm,
But I could get more into that because I think that stuff is fascinating. I think it's so important to know the systems and the history and the evolution. Anyway,
yeah,
you have this baby that would literally die if you don't do literally everything for it. Put food in its mouth, right? Like put clothes or blankets on it when it's too cold and take them off. Stop things from being on it, falling on it, stop it from falling on things. There's that responsibility, and it lessens as time goes on, and the child becomes more independent. But the other thing that's inherent in being a parent is the assumption / desire that I'm not going to be around forever. I intend, I hope that this child outlives me, if nothing else, but especially in our modern context, that at some point they're doing their own thing and I'm less impactful, less important, have less control over their lives. And you can't look at a child that you love, and not everybody loves the children that they have, but if you do, you can't look at a child that you love, recognize that you have a limited time to try and work with this person before they're off on their own, without immediately projecting into what's going to happen when I'm not around. So then we start to make a lot of decisions about what I'm doing right now in this moment based on what I think is going to pay off for them later on. Sometimes I make them do stuff that they don't want to do because I think it's worth doing. Sometimes I don't allow them to do stuff that they want to do because I think it might cause problems. And even if that problem just means like you might fall off of that table and hit your head, right? Like in this moment, but it can get further and further into the future. And the further it goes, the less predictability, the less certainty, the more anxiety. Which is why all parents are always anxious about their kids, because you don't know what's going to happen and you really, really care. The extent to which you care about what's going to happen is much higher than the extent to which you have an ability to control or predict what's going to happen. That gap causes anxiety.
Yeah. I have an 18-month-old, as you know, and people ask me what are the best and the worst things, or the best and the hardest things about being a parent. And I keep coming back to this, like, just constant feeling like I am making decisions on a moment-to-moment basis for someone who already has a hard time making decisions that have the potential to impact this child's future on a moment-to-moment basis. The amount of pressure, you gotta scale, you gotta pull yourself back from that. I have to pull myself back from that because that's insane.
But the vast majority of what you do, you don't consider, you don't make a decision, you just do it, and all that stuff impacts them too.
Yeah.
But that's because we're aiming at the
terrifying,
outcome, which is natural and fine. I'm not ever going to try and talk a parent into like, hey, don't worry about what happens to them later on.
Right.
I care about what happens to my kids later on.
Yes.
Which things I care about, I might try and talk people out of caring about particular things, right? Like what their sexuality or gender identity or things, like maybe don't care so much about those things, right?
Yeah.
But even then, we have to approach it from acknowledging that there's a reason that the parent cares about it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an inherent reason. The reason sometimes is just because everybody says they should care about it, right? Because that's what we do. We're humans. We listen to people. We respond to people. You tell me that the sun revolves around the earth and everybody else says it too. Okay, that seems right. That looks like how it is. Then you tell me, no, actually the earth revolves around the sun and everybody else says it too. Okay, yeah, that sounds right too. You made a sense. I have not done personal investigation into this. I believe you.
Yeah, we've got a new comment from someone new, G31, saying on a somewhat related note, how do you deal with the uncertainty of sending a child off to school when they're increasingly becoming targets of terrorist attacks?
I read that question as you were reading it. That's why I said OFA and caught myself and stopped. Look, I wish I had an answer for this.
Oof.
I wish. I wish. I mean, the people that I listen to and the people that I trust have given good answers about what to do on like a society level, on a policy level, and I am very much pro gun control. I am probably further in that direction than even most people who are pro gun control are. I don't really see the need or purpose for a lot of that. So there's that. And sure, there's things you can do. You can buy bulletproof backpacks, which is a ridiculous thing that even exists, that there's a market for it, and that I know about it.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But at the end of the day, it's just anxiety. You're going to do it or you're not going to do it. You're assessing how likely you think it is. And fortunately, even though it's getting worse and worse, it is still overwhelmingly unlikely that it happens at your child's school, any given child's school on any given day, right?
Yeah.
So really, more than anything, this is about, we would go the direction we would go in talking about any form of anxiety. If you can examine the decision and whether you want to make a different one, pull them out or send them to a different place or train them or
Homeschool or whatever. Yeah.
whatever, you can examine that. But if you've examined all that and you've fallen on the choice, like my wife and I have fallen on, that we're still going to send them to school, then at that point, it's about managing your anxiety. And we would talk about it any same way we talk about any other anxiety.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you talk to people about managing anxiety, would you, I mean, you're talking about after they've done all the statistics, but like my first thought is, okay, can I compare this to like being struck by lightning? Like, is there something that doesn't give me anxiety that's still a threat that could help me decrease my anxiety about this thing? Do you know what I mean?
That can work, but I don't personally like to go that direction, just
Yeah.
because you're just reminding yourself of other bad things that could also happen.
You start becoming anxious about lightning.
Right. It might have the impact of being like, well, driving in a car is more dangerous than going to school. So I guess, and I don't worry about driving in the car, so I shouldn't. But these are apples and oranges comparisons. When you're driving in a car, what you do has more of an impact. You have more control.
Yeah.
There are different variables, right? So it's also possible sometimes that then you're just going to be like, oh my gosh, I should be more worried about driving in a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to not like to go that way. What I like to do is two things, and I kind of described them both like quickly just there a moment ago. One is, are we actually considering whether there's something else that might be a better thing to do? And if that's what we're going to do, we have a whole process of exploring that, of exploring what are the different elements and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It as like a generic kind of a thing, one thing that I might do, like if someone's anxious about public speaking or whatever, and they have to get up in front of somebody and talk, then we can say, okay, what's the percentage chance in your estimation? Just, you don't have to justify it, just based on your feel. We would talk about what's the good outcome? If it went well, what would that be? What's the bad outcome? If it went poorly, what would that be? What's the most likely outcome that you think is going to happen? And then we can look at, okay, what do you think the likelihood is that the good outcome is the one that happens? I don't know, 30? Ooh, that's low. Okay, yeah, I can see why you'd be anxious about that. Is there anything you can do that might get that number higher? Like, it's not going to guarantee that it goes well, but it makes it more likely. I guess if I practice with my note cards, how much higher would that make it go? 35? All right. Is it worth that? Is it worth doing the note cards to have that extra 5% certainty? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'll try it. Cool. So we can do things like that. Look at different things to do to prepare, or different options to be able to avoid the thing, or do it in a way that makes the worst case scenario not as bad as it would have been, or whatever. But once we're committed to a decision, once it's like, this is happening,
I'm sending my kid to school. This is they're going to be there on a daily basis. Then
you might not like this, but it's about paying attention to other stuff. There's no way to make yourself stop worrying about something by willing yourself to stop worrying about it.
Damn.
So whatever you do right now, don't think about a purple elephant, whatever you do. Yeah, it's a purple elephant. Because even the thought, I'm not thinking about a purple elephant right now. Damn it. That's a thought about a purple elephant. Don't think about a purple elephant is a thought about a purple elephant, right? We do not have a mechanism that allows us to think less about something or notice something less.
Yeah.
We have things to change the impact that it has on us, how much we're thinking or noticing, we can change that. And there are things that we can do that make it so that we're less likely in the future to think about it, or that we think about it less frequently. But when you're actively thinking about it, there is no action you can take to decrease the extent you're thinking about it. What we can do is make ourselves think about other things. We can increase how much we think about stuff. And I can only think about so much. So you mentioned before, like, oh, the pressure of all these decisions, how is it going to impact my 18-month-old? Do you think about that and worry about that so much when you're working?
No.
Even though theoretically, even your absence is impacting him.
Yeah.
You just don't have room to think about it because you're thinking about other things.
Yeah.
And I might have just made you feel really bad and anxious. I don't know by mentioning that.
Yeah. No, but yeah. I mean, I feel like this is potentially, why, things like this, the super high anxiety things are why people become workaholics, or why people tend to like find things in their life that they can obsess over so they don't have this looming thing, this looming anxiety.
What's really fun about that is if I, as an individual, or we as a society, judge whatever thing they're doing that's taking their attention instead of the thing that they're anxious about, if we judge it to be something childish, we call it escapism. They're escaping from reality by escaping into their video games. If we think it's something sinful, we call it a vice.
Mm-hmm.
They're self-medicating with alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
They're retreating into their drug usage or whatever. If we think it's something productive or something that we like, then we don't even acknowledge the fact that it is also serving the function of taking up room so that they're not anxious about whatever other thing. We just say they really love their work.
Yeah. No,
he really loves golf. She really loves baking, and I chose stereotypical gender things because those are the ones that tend to get talked about that way.
Mm.
It's when a woman really loves her work that all of a sudden we're saying, but what isn't she doing while she's at work? It's when a man starts being real into gardening and baking that we're like, but what isn't he doing while he's doing those things?
Oh, fascinating.
Not that one nearly as much.
Yeah.
You can also suss this stuff out by where people use the term addiction, because nobody really knows what that word means. It's
right.
Poorly defined, but even definitions that exist, most people don't know.
Mm.
So people don't tend to say like, yeah, she's addicted to gardening. Yeah, he's addicted to building model cars. We just say they're addicted to something that we find sinful.
Yeah.
Pornography, drugs, gambling, and the new one, video games, or the internet or social media, whatever.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, for a lot of people, that's just the cardinal Catholic sin, the 7 deadly sins of sloth. They just think screen equals laziness. Therefore,
that's interesting. Well, we are at time.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap this convoluted conversation up.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer to that question about the terrorist attacks. It's something I worried about too. I would say the best thing to do in terms of like action towards making it less likely to happen would be on the political level, the advocacy level, not on the individual level, that you can do something for your child that, makes them safer in the event of something like that. I would say that COVID is slightly different. We're still politics and policy and advocacy. It should be more of a systems approach and put your efforts there. And even within that, you have your kid wear a mask. It does actually protect them more so than if they didn't. So some things, there just aren't really good individual things that you can do.
Yeah.
It's part of the crappiness of being aware of so many things that you don't actually have any impact over.
So many threats. Things that feel like threats. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for all these great comments.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
And thanks, Zoe, for being here. So much better when it's not just me talking about the word.
Indeed. I get it. All right.
See you next week, same time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.